Hello, my name is Blair. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the Sensory Awareness series. And welcome to a mini-series within the Sensory Awareness series. I guess you could say I have a series problem. I should stop. So today is day 4, and we are going to be starting part 1 of the sensory timeline. So basically, I want to walk you through each stage of a person's development and then explain how SPD can affect that. Before we start, I want to emphasize something. No one is born with sensory integration skills, and we live in a world that's pretty demanding. If the child that you're thinking about when you watch this video occasionally gets upset when they eat a food with a weird texture, or they take a while to learn how to walk or something, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have SPD. Don't jump to conclusions, pay attention to the consistency and severity of symptoms. If you are truly concerned, seek professional evaluation if at all possible. I didn't want these videos to be just me reading off a symptom list, so I am going to be talking a little bit more broadly in this video, but if you want a more exhaustive look at SPD in children, I recommend reading the book The Out of Sync Child by Carol Kranowitz. I will link to a copy in the description. And I'll also be linking a couple of different symptom lists in the description if you want to check those out as well. And of course, a quick reminder that I am not a qualified professional to diagnose any disorders. I'm just a person who lives with SPD, speaking from my own research and my own experience. So let's get started by talking about early childhood, so about years 1 through 5. At this point in a person's life, they are learning what it means to be and to feel, and their number one goal is just to explore the world and develop a concept of self. However, very young children with SPD will likely be very hesitant to explore. Based on the type of SPD they have, the world they exist in is either horribly invasive, so far away it seems out of reach, or completely confusing, or all of the above, or multiple at the same time, or on the same day. SPD can make the world a really scary place to be, not the kind of place you want to poke around for too long. The SPD child will likely cling to routine, because they are afraid of being overwhelmed or hurt by trying something new. But when you don't explore, you don't grow. Kids with SPD might be developmentally delayed, although they aren't necessarily developmentally disabled. Verbal, motor, and social skills are just a few examples of areas in the child's life that can be impacted by SPD. Without these foundational abilities, everything else is guaranteed to be more difficult. Because when you can't trust what your senses are telling you, how can you trust anything? And if you can't trust anything, how can you trust anyone? SPD kids are likely to feel isolated within their own minds, even at a young age. It's hard for a young SPD kid to even go a single day without a meltdown. I do have a video coming soon about meltdowns, so stay tuned for that. Next, we move on up into late childhood, ages 6 to 10. Kids at this age are becoming more and more communicative and socially aware, starting to interact a lot with peers, make their own friends, and develop their own interests. As we grow older, I think a lot of us forget how hard it really is to be a child. You have little to no control over where you go, what you do, what you eat, how you look, and you can't communicate your thoughts, feelings, and opinions as well as those big tall people can. And even when you do, there's no guarantee that anyone will take you seriously. Add to that any form of SPD, and you have a child who has no room in their mind to do what kids should be doing, like playing, talking to their friends, and thinking about who they are and what they enjoy. Because they're still at square one, which is basic sensory integration, SPD can also hinder the development of psychological skills that are really important, like impulse control and emotional regulation. Progressing in school can be extremely challenging for kids with SPD. If your brain is so busy trying to manage everything that you're getting, like the lights and the sounds and the feeling of sitting in a chair, how your socks feel on your feet, if you're too busy thinking about that kind of thing all day long, how much can you really learn from a day at school? Academic difficulties can bring a lot of frustration to the surface, and meltdowns might occur more frequently than would be expected for the age or in response to really atypical things. Their peers might start to think of them as odd or weird and not want to interact with them, and they might even experience bullying. SPD during this stage can seem a lot like ADHD. You got attention issues, you got constant motion, you got developmental delays, but look a little closer. Of course, a professional evaluation can help you kind of suss out whether it really is SPD or ADHD, or both, but pay attention to what the real issue seems to be. Is the child's lack of sensory integration what's really causing the attention problem? If possible, talk to the child directly about what they're going through. Kids can be surprisingly articulate if you just give them the chance to be. If no other explanation seems to fit the bill, consider that there might be an underlying sensory issue. So when we're having this conversation about things to look for with kids who have sensory issues, I think equally as important as the development of actual sensory integration skills is keeping an eye on how they're doing psychologically. SPD affects every part of a person's life, including their self-esteem and emotional security. When I was a kid, I never saw or heard of anybody who looked like me, so I never knew that I was different. And the conclusion that I came to in my child mind was that everyone's brain was like that. Everyone was experiencing this level of discomfort and mental chaos all the time, but I was the only one who couldn't handle it, because I was the only one who had those obvious reactions like meltdowns and stimming. So I began to think of myself as a defective version of normal, and I still struggle with this mindset every single day. SPD, although not a psychological disorder, permanently affected my psychological development. Since my brain never knew when the next trigger would come, I was always anticipating being in pain. My brain became stuck in fight or flight mode, which is called hypervigilance. When I was around others, I tried to be as normal as possible by masking, suppressing my stimming behaviors and my emotional reactions to sensory overload. This took up almost all of my willpower, and most of the time, it didn't even work. Although I was good at school, I was very disconnected from my peers and quite behind in emotional regulation skills. So now I hope you see a little bit how SPD doesn't only affect the sensory dimension of a person's life, it affects everything about their development. Possible support solutions do include occupational therapy, probably with a sensory integration framework. Depending on how much the child's academic progress is affected, they might need an IEP so that they can get whatever accommodations they need for school. However, I personally don't have experience with those things, and I know that OT isn't always accessible for everyone, so here's some strategies that anyone can pick up and use. Number 1, maintain a calm and patient presence as much as possible. Communicate both with your words and your actions that they are accepted and loved for who they are. If you tell them, "I support you," but then you punish them for stimming or having a meltdown, they're not going to feel very supported. Going along the same lines, notice stimming behaviors, but don't punish them. Now, if the stim is something really just extremely disruptive, like blowing an air horn or something, you don't have to necessarily be a doormat, you know? You don't have to accept something that's disruptive to you personally. If they're really young, you can kind of just redirect them to another behavior, but make sure that other behavior serves the same purpose. If the stim that they're engaging in, for example, is an auditory stim, redirect to another auditory stim. If you try to go from a visual stim to a proprioceptive stim, that's not going to work because it's not going to fulfill the same purpose. If they're an older child, you can talk with them to find a compromise. Problem solving and working with other people to get both needs met is an important part of growing up, and it's a skill that they're going to need anyway. So why not use it as a teachable moment? And of course, sometimes there are self-injuring sensory behaviors, but those are a separate issue, and I will get to that in a few days. Trust me, I had too much to say about that one for it to be just one sentence in a video. One of the most important things you can do is model body awareness for them. You can do this by verbalizing your own thought processes when you start to feel upset or like you are starting to go into sensory overload yourself. When you start to feel like you're, getting up to here, don't hide that from them. Say, I'm starting to get upset, or I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. This feels really just kind of ridiculous to do out loud, but it really is helpful for kids to connect the dots like that. This might take a little bit of introspection on your part. How are your sensory integration skills? Especially if it's your child you're thinking that might have SPD, half of their DNA is yours. So that is everything I have to say today about SPD in childhood. I know we really just flew through a lot of concepts very quickly, but if you are looking for more information, I have linked to the STAR Institute's website in the description. It has a lot of articles, a great symptom checklist, and resources for finding professional evaluations. I've also linked some books in the description that I recommend. Of course, The Out of Sync Child is specifically about SPD, but I find that reading books just about communicating with children in general is really helpful because it gives them the ability to tell you what's going on instead of you just having to guess from their behavior. Make sure communication is a two-way street as much as it is able to be. We've reached the end of day 4. Yay! Thank you for watching this video. Remember to do something sensational today, and hopefully I will see you back tomorrow for the next part of the sensory timeline. Bye!